There are certain roles and there are certain beliefs and there are certain expectations that you have to be willing to let go of in order to really move in and focus on what's most in alignment and endearing for you.
Excessive work is not aligned with basically a well-lived life, a life that is aligned with our deeper core values. So all of that work without the alignment brought you to a state of illness.
I know it was a self-limiting belief that, well, how am I going to be able to afford this? And what I decided to do was really flip that belief around and ask myself, how could traveling the world actually be the key to my financial freedom?
You're listening to Solving for Joy. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissie Ott. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Solving for Joy podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissie Ott, and I have the honor today of introducing you to my friend Kristine Goins. Dr. Kristine Goins is such an inspiration to me, and in the words of Angelica from Hamilton, I'm about to change your life. So, Dr. Goins, we met at the Physician Coaching Summit just last month, November 2024. Dr. Goins is an integrative psychiatrist, child and adolescent psychiatrist, who has learned that staying in one place and working full time is not the only way to be alive as a physician. So I'm so excited to hear your stories and insights today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Chrissy. I'm so excited to be here.
So excited to have you here too. So you came to the coaching summit to speak about your business, NomadMD, the NomadMD. So I'm going to just tell everybody up top, the nomadmd.com is where you can find Kristine's amazing blog, insights, ways to follow her on Instagram. But tell us a little bit about the origin story of the NomadMD. And I'm not going to unwrap the present. I'll let you unwrap the present and just tell people what is so fun and different about how you get to live as a physician.
Yes. So, I would say things really started as a child. Like, I wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old, and I wanted to travel the world since I was a teenager. But I did not have the resources, the opportunity to do any of that. So I traveled a lot in my imagination through reading. And I was always trying to figure out, during this journey into medicine, like, how do I combine these passions? Like, how do I do all the things that are most important to my life? And as many of us as physicians have experienced or learned along the way, medicine, at least the way that we're taught to do it, has a way of having you neglect a lot of other things that may be important to you, as you pursue this kind of singular focus in medicine. And so I found that experience for me. And, during different periods of medical school, during different periods of residency, I experienced burnout and depression, especially when I'd be working, over 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And that's when I really saw it, become so significant. And so I thought, moving into being an attending, oh, well, now I'm set. Like, this is going to be the best. Like, I have the freedom.
Hello, arrival fallacy, right?
Yes. I'm just like, whoa, this is not what I thought. More expectations, more responsibilities, less time than I had before. It led me to a place of having chest pains in the middle of my workday where I thought I was having a heart attack,
Oh.
having whole body like spasms and sitting in a neurologist's office, wondering if I have, a chronic neurological illness. And what I found is all of this was a physical manifestation of me not living in alignment with the life that I really wanted all along. And so I had had this 5-year plan of what I was gonna do and, then I'm gonna transition out, I'm gonna start traveling, and COVID happened and both of my grandmothers died, and I said, you think you have time, but you never know." And so really the time is now.
The time is always now.
Yes. Yes. And so I changed my 5-year plan to a 5-month plan, and I booked a one-way ticket to Colombia, and I left the US, and I left academia, and I became a digital nomad.
That is there's so much encapsulated in what I know is the very streamlined version of that story just now. So I heard, courage, I heard persistence, I heard you calling yourself in on the sequencing fallacy that you taught about during your talk at the coaching summit, which I would really love for you to share more about sort of like that sequencing fallacy later on with our audience. And I heard you describe like excessive work is not aligned with basically a well lived life, a life that is aligned with our deeper core values, which we bring repeatedly into our metacognitive awareness, right? So, all of that work without the alignment that is more
Yes.
three-dimensional, four-dimensional, if you have imagination, brought you to a state of illness. We bring up the word burnout,
Yes.
and you're describing also very scary physical manifestations of not being well as a direct result of a life out of balance. I am so grateful and like just I have so much um, sympathetic joy that you had that discovery and that you are leading the way. Like I feel very Statue of Liberty vibes with your like torch in the air leading the way, like showing people this not only is it possible, it's freaking delightful. Alignment
Absolutely.
feels good. Many of us hear that story, get very excited, and at the very like instantaneously after the excitement come all the mental obstacles and hurdles. Right. I know that this is probably so core to how you support physicians that would like to be at least part-time digital nomads. So, talk to me, please. Talk to my brain about obstacles because they feel really scary and overwhelming to so many of us who think, I want some of that for myself, but I don't know if I can get there. How do I get there?
Yes. I think the first place to start is getting clarity, the clarity in what you really want. Because I think we've spent a lot of time being socialized and conditioned and taught what to want, and not enough time sitting with ourselves, sitting in silence, and really contemplating what is most important for us. And I think it's really hard to move into or pivot into a life and a career that is most aligned with the core of who you are if you don't know what that is and what it looks like and what it would feel like.
Amen to that. It's so true. We are taught what to want, and we are supposed to want the mainstream things, right? I mean, one of the things that really strikes me, and I told you this as we were departing from Arizona, like you showed up with this, hard body suitcase, and you were like, yeah, everything I own, except for the few things that are in a bigger suitcase at my mom's house, are in this suitcase right now. And if I could just like walk around with a brain exploding emoji on my head, like that made my brain explode. It's like, tell me more about this freedom from objects, Kristine. It sounds glorious.
Yeah, I think it came from the process of really practicing essentialism, and it was a process over time. I think it's really hard to go from having many, many objects, a house of objects, maybe even a storage locker of objects, to living out of a carry-on, and you don't make those kind of changes overnight. But I think the gradual progression of designing a life where I have all of the things that are most important to me, and I'm willing to let go of all of the things that are not. It creates this vacuum that doesn't mean that you lack anything, but that you have everything and more than enough of everything that is most important. And so I think it's that emotional process. It's like an inside out process. And then eventually, how it manifests itself externally is that my things fit in the carry on.
I mean, I think I'm probably not alone listening to that and just again being mind blown and thinking about all the what ifs, but also being really compelled by the ease that it sounds like would come along with that kind of freedom.
I mean, I think that it is very light. Like, there's something about being willing to surrender, being willing to let go. And this is a process that is so vital to like moving into things that you want because there are certain roles and there are certain beliefs and there are certain expectations that you have to be willing to let go of in order to really move in and focus on what's most, in alignment and endearing for you.
I'm drawn again to the word courage, like you have developed this muscle by exercising it in various ways over time, right? And you said the word vital too, like literally life giving, life affirming, and that freedom.
No, I think you're absolutely right that courage is really essential. And sometimes we forget that the very definition of courage means that fear is going to be there. It's supposed to be there. It's present. And it's the moving through that aspect that really allows us to bring to fruition what we're looking for.
I love it. It's also reminding me that core is heart, right? In French. So being courageous is being brave hearted and wholehearted, which is so much of what you are absolutely living in this intentional lifestyle. Christine, will you tell us what it's like to be you for a week? What is your work schedule? Where have you traveled? What do you do when you're not doing this or that of your work baskets? Tell us. Tell us what it's like to be a digital nomad physician.
So, how I've been structuring my life is that I currently see patients 1 day a week. A couple other days a week, I'll see clients throughout the day. When I'm not seeing clients, I'm probably at yoga class or I'm going for a walk or I'm meeting new people in the city and country that I'm living in. Like, for instance, yesterday I was, for the first time ever, experiencing Mexican baseball. I didn't even know that Mexico had major leagues. So it was an awesome experience, but just being very immersed in the present and the culture and the language that I'm experiencing at the time. That's how I spend most of my time, or I'm resting, laying down, but it's really about having these prescribed times for work and allowing my free leisure time to just flow.
I love that. That is so aspirational to me and to most physicians that I know. Yeah, how often do you change locations?
So typically, I'll stay in a country for about 3 to 6 months. And within that country, I'll stay in every city for at least a month, if not longer. So I like it to be at least a month in a location to have enough time to meet new people, to engage, to form the depth of relationship that I think I need in order to be able to get a really good feel of the culture and the location and then be able to decide if it's a place that I want to return to again and again and continue to deepen those relationships and connections. So that's usually what I'm doing. And sometimes people ask me, like, how do I choose the places? I also study wine. And so a lot of times I'm spending time in wine regions and exploring the wine in that particular location, or it's on that childhood list of a zillion countries that I said I always wanted to go to, and it's one of them, and I'm there. So,
So amazing. I think it's so wise to stay long enough to really feel the place, to feel like you're a resident of the place, even a
mhm.
temporary one, and immerse yourself in what it has to offer.
Absolutely, and it's different than, being on vacation because all of my healthcare is outside of the US. So, this is where I'm going to the doctor and the dentist, and this is where I'm getting my hair done. And, you know, I really I obviously I have very strong connections with people who are from the US, my family and my friends who I've always had and will always have. But I do like to make sure that I spend a lot of time making and deepening those connections with people who live locally where I am.
I have so many technical questions and I could ask them for hours probably, but do you ever have issues with visas, immigration stuff? How do you coordinate those aspects of your ongoing travel adventure?
Yeah, I've never had any visa issue. Um, Really, the way I design how long I'm gonna be in a space is gonna be around the visa so that it really doesn't ever become an issue. So, most of the places that I go, US citizens can be there for 3 to 6 months with a visa on demand, like, at arrival, so it's not really an issue. So maybe later on in my journey when I'm going to a place that requires all the visas, you know, beforehand, it'll become an issue, but I've been traveling for 4 years full time now, and it hasn't been an issue, so I think I'm okay.
That is amazing. It's a question I hadn't asked yet. How long have you been doing this? And 4 years is a pretty long time. You told me you started in 2020, right? So that's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yes, it's been a journey.
I know this is not a private conversation, so I will defer to you to share what makes sense to share. But I know that many of us are thinking financial questions, right? Like how does one quote unquote afford to do this, and would it be possible to do this while keeping a household in the States? And like how does that work out in your situation,
Mhm.
acknowledging that there are many, many variations on the theme that we could explore.
For sure. I think finances was one of my biggest fears when I was making this transition. And I think for a lot of physicians, it's one of their biggest fears, and it's usually top of
Of
mind.
course. Mhm.
So I really, looking back, I know it was a self limiting belief that, well, how am I going to be able to afford this? And what I decided to do was really flip that belief around and ask myself, how could traveling the world actually be the key to my financial freedom? And just asking myself there really led me to some very interesting places where I learned that it life became so much more affordable, at a much higher quality of life by doing what I actually wanted to do, which was live abroad. So when you're thinking about, your 4 big ticket items, when you're thinking about housing, transportation, healthcare, food, all of these things are typically, I mean, if you're moving to Switzerland, it's different, but typically are going to be much lower costs of living, when you're abroad versus when you're in the US. And so, you know, m- my quality of life was enhanced, but all of my expenses were probably cut in a third, if not a half. And I went from working over 60 hours a week to working a day or 2, but making the same compensation. So, it's just a strategic shift in thinking about how I could do the work that I was doing, what aspects of the work were most meaningful to me, what are some other ways that I could do it besides the way that I was taught, and in my mind, like the most virtuous, this is the way that if I'm serving the best way I can serve, this is the way to do it. Really just trying to expand my imagination about what it means to be a doctor and how it means to show up to my patients and my clients being my most authentic, full, whole, self. And I could do that when I'm working less as opposed to when I'm overworking.
I mean, you just described the root of joy for me, which is meaning alignment and delight, right? You are demonstrating solving for joy. You are demonstrating how a construct that we thought was a constant, i.e., living in the United States, can become a variable, right? I mean, all of
Yes.
these what else is possible questions are such premium coaching material. I'm just like high fiving you all over the place right now. So exciting. Kristine, I have a fantasy about living and working from places like, for some reason, Rome comes up. I've never been to Rome. It's on my bucket list. And I am a person, and I know I'm not the only one, who has put travel off, way off for way too long. That I have a lot more travel in my heart than I have done with my feet. And I really want to change that starting now. So, would you please share with me a couple of things? Like, what are some of the ways that people who live a nomadic lifestyle, even part time, how do they make it work, especially if they have children? And I mean, also animals. I'm thinking of like, we have a 3 dog family, and going away for a long while, being away from the dogs really freaks me out too. How do people
Yes.
look at this, and what are some ways that are not maybe as obvious?
Yes. Well, first I'll say it is very, very popular, and there are many families that are living nomadically and just location free, because for some people, they might not want to live nomadically. They might want to do what you're kind of suggesting and maybe live part time in a particular place like Rome, maybe part time in the US, part time in Rome. Some of the things that come up typically are like education, like they're thinking about the education of their children and how will that be, continued. And there are so many ways to go about that. There are world schooling communities that believe in the cultural immersion of, children and the benefit of that education versus, our formal education, which could be, sitting in the classroom learning from a book. Like, how do they experience the language and the the pyramids and whatever it is that they've been learning about in the book, like they are going to be tasting, touching, experiencing it in real life. And there are a lot of different educational programs that are very versatile depending on the family and how they can go about that. There are a lot of communities that have families that move together even so that the children get to, have peers who have a similar lifestyle, who are maybe even from the same, home country, but now they're experiencing life in this other way. When we're thinking about the adults too, right? Sometimes adults get kind of nervous about making friends, as adults. And I would say, I've found that it's a practice, but a lot of these communities allow you to really be exploring that and evolving in that way, but not alone. And so there's plenty of ways to be able to engage and do those things together. So it's really working on the logistics and building community and belonging as you go. And there's a lot of space to be able to do that. There was another question you had, but I can't remember all of the
That
questions.
was great for kids. I know I stacked some questions there because the excitement is I have a lot of excitement for these answers. Okay, so what do people do if they have pets at home?
Yes, pets. So I know that there are even airlines, but also companies that will help you to transport your pets. People think about, strategically where they're going to make sure that, their cats, their dogs, their pets will be allowed in that country because some countries do have stipulations about, allowing pets to enter. Um, but because this lifestyle is so popular and because so many people are living abroad and traveling right now, there are like airlines and companies that are dedicated to getting your 3 dogs to roam. Okay? So, that I don't think that's something that you have to worry too much about.
Wow. Somebody's figured everything out, huh? That's wild. How do you approach the question of language? I know that you've been to the country of Georgia, and Mexico, and I know that South Africa is coming up. So, how do you approach the language issue for each of these places?
One of my techniques is to get a tutor ahead of time. And so it helps in a number of different ways. First, you get to start practicing what are the most important and basic essentials for the language in the country that you're going to. But also, and I think this part is critical, I like to get a tutor that is from that country. And so they know the nuances, they know the culture really well. And it also means that you have a friend in that country before you ever get there. So, if any question or concern or anything comes up, you already have a connection in that country. And so for me, it's really essential. I've learned over time that you don't need to be fluent, and I did not know Georgian when I started living in Georgia, and I still don't know Georgian. But, I was able through tutoring and through meeting different locals there to learn some of the basics that allow me to be, kind and to be curious and for people to know that I'm here to connect and that I want to try and know, the language of the place that I'm in. And so I think that's probably the most important part. I found that kindness is universal. And no matter what country I go to, people want to help me figure it out. They want to help me, you know, decide which box of cereal I should be getting because I don't exactly know what it's saying anymore. People are there for that. And so and so it is okay when you walk in being, curious, but also having that desire to connect and learn.
Love that so much. There's also so much we could talk about with just travel etiquette, right? Like, how do you travel to a different country and show that you're interested in not just, bringing all of the US vibes and really learning more about them? I think many people might be listening and thinking about safety, especially as a woman who chooses to travel alone in the whole wide world. I mean, back to
Yes.
courage, right? Bravery. Do you have thoughts to share about, traveling safely and smartly, taking care of yourself?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important aspects of safety abroad is back to that knowing yourself and having spent some time in silence because traveling is a very good time to be tapping into your intuition. And when you have the whispers or the voice that says, "It's time to go," you leave. And the whisper that says, "Oh, this is really great," and then you stay and you explore and you connect. So I think that's probably one of the most important things that I've done is continue to enhance and grow my own intuition. But I would also say just from, like, a practical standpoint, um, making sure that you also connect with, the department, the embassy before you leave. There's programs that you register with that allows the US Embassy in whatever country that you're in to alert you if there is gonna be, a protest or anything that you need to be concerned about. That will be something that I think is just really important to do. When I get to a country, I think it's really important to develop 2 sets of friendships. Friendships with people in the local community and friendships with people in the expat or nomad community because both of them can have, um, really important information that the other group might not have. And I would say that both are important to safety of where to go and where not to go, and maybe some of the cultural norms that are going to be important for you to maintain in that space that you might not be thinking about. And I mean, I think those are the major things. I've grown up in a urban, community, so I think keeping my head on a swivel is just kind of normal thing that I do, but not walking out late at night with your cell phone like this. Like, it's just some of it is
Yeah, common
I
sense.
think of it as common sense, but not everyone
Mhm.
does, and people get their phones stolen every day because they don't do that. But
Yeah.
the rest to me is just kind of being aware of your surroundings.
Thank you for sharing that. That's such good wisdom for anybody really traveling. And I hadn't thought about alerting the embassy for things like that, but especially when it's your full time life, like it's just seems really smart to take care of those details in advance. Where are you off to next, Christine?
Next, I will be headed off to South Africa. Quite excited. It'll be my first time on the continent, so I'm excited.
And I don't think that we said on the air where you're located right now.
Right now, I'm in Guadalajara, Mexico. Yes.
And how long have you been there?
I've been here about 2.5 months now, and it's amazing. I've lived in 6 other Mexican cities in the past, and this is definitely one of my favorite. It's amazing. I mean, guess it's not that surprising because even in the US, you can go to cities where you're like, "Is this still the same country?" But it's the same it's the same way here in Mexico. It's like, wow, everywhere I go, there's some similarities, but there are also some unique differences that make traveling so fun.
That is so cool. Christine, I would love if you could share with us some kind of like core memory, something that's really unforgettable, or maybe there's more than one that you'll share from these travels, like just life experiences you would never have had without opening this door.
One that comes to mind because you break up safety. But another thing, at least a fear I had, was going abroad, particularly by myself, and then having like a health incident and how that would, impact me being by myself. And so I was traveling in Mexico and I happened to be traveling with my sister because my family visits me often. They like to travel and they like free housing. So, um, she came to visit me but she was leaving, so she had left, and it just so happened that I was now back alone and had, a major medical event and procedure that I needed to undergo, and I didn't know anyone at the time because I usually, like, tap in a little bit more to community, but my sister was there, so I was just kind of focused on our connection. And the only person that I had really met was my dentist. I had went to a dentist appointment, like, the week before and connected with my dentist, and because they knew that I was undergoing this procedure and they knew I wasn't gonna be alone. They took off from work of their practice. They closed down their practice to make sure they could be with me before the procedure. They waited for me after the procedure. They cooked meals for me because I couldn't do it myself after the procedure. Like, I mean, it was just like, what? Like, some people's families don't do that for them. Like, it was just, like, incredible. This was someone I literally met the week before, and it really showed me, I feel like Mexico is one of those countries that people are like, "Don't go there. It's so unsafe." Like, and I'm not saying there's unsafe places everywhere, and there's plenty in the US. I think we all know that. But it was just amazing to me to see the kindness of humanity, and I see it so many places that I go to just have someone who didn't really know me care so much about my well-being and see how they could serve and be of help to be there for me. And so I just say, for people who are thinking about going abroad, there's always someone, who's there. You don't have to know ahead of time, but that's willing to show their kindness. Another situation, I was in Georgia actually, and I was on a tour, and I just happened to mention that, it was my birthday week and I was there by myself, and it just so happened that the person who was leading the tour wasn't the typical person. They happened to be the owner because someone had gotten sick, a bunch of people got sick, and they just need to step in. And the owner of the company was like, "It's your birthday. I'm gonna send you on a tour of the Georgian wine region for free just to celebrate yourself." And I was just like, what did I do to deserve this kind of life? Like, it was just like, so I just feel like that's one of the major things I've run into again and again and again is just the kindness of humanity.
Talk about restoring one's faith in humanity. That is so beautiful. It's so enriching to have those random
Yes.
connecting experiences. I'm so touched by that dentist. Really is beautiful. How is your
Yes.
Spanish, Christine, since you've been to 6 different cities in Mexico?
I've been studying Spanish for 20 years. So you would
Mhm.
think that it's absolutely fluent. It is absolutely not where I want it to be, but I'm always working on it. One day I'll wanna speak as if I was native, but but I love that it's something that I can always, enhance and work on and learn more and tweak, but I'm pretty good.
I love it. And I think I remember Peru is one of the places that you spent some time too. Is that right?
Yes,
Were
yes,
you in
and you
Lima?
spent
Do you tend to like go to big cities?
I balance it because my true, like, home kind of place are very small places. Like, my favorite place I've ever been to is Bocas del Toro, Panama, which is, an archipelago off the coast of Panama in the Caribbean, and, I mean, you have to ride your bike to get around there, it's a very, very small place, but that's what I love most, so I like to balance it. I think that's one of the beautiful things about being nomadic is that I could balance being in a big city and all that, the conveniences that that might offer with being able to also be in smaller, more remote locations where there's also a lot of beauty and a lot of connection and a lot of really special aspects to being in a small place.
I'm gonna totally look that place up. Bocas del Toro in Panama. Is that
Yes.
what you said?
Mhm. Mhm.
Mouth of Bulls.
Yes. Yes. And
And
one
are
day.
you writing a book as you go?
Well, I've been journaling since I was in 5th grade. So at some point, I have all the
Nice.
memories that are there. At some point, I will
Amazing.
turn it into a book.
That is so powerful. I mean, I love the power of journaling, and I just am thinking, like, you in some ways, I'm going to propose this hypothesis that you had a pathway to be so clear about knowing yourself, potentially in part related to the fact that you've been writing your thoughts to yourself all of this time.
I have never thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. Like that that's a really cool observation. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like journaling is a way of relating to yourself and clarifying your own voice and thoughts. And so much of what we do or don't do is related to how clearly can we hear our own voice and thoughts, and then how clearly can we actually open the door to greater possibilities and bigger thoughts. What is our moonshot? If we don't ever
Yes.
ask, we don't get to know.
Definitely.
Well, the life that you are living feels like a big moonshot to me, and I'm sure is going to be just as inspiring to so many other people. Um, what have I not asked that you think would be fantastic for people to know about some of the journey and some of the experience you've gained along the way.
I think one of the things that has really helped us to become who we are today, be successful physicians, is the commitment that we made so many years prior to go along this journey. And a lot of times I like to remind doctors that it's the same way when you're deciding to pivot or make a shift into a different kind of career lifestyle, that the commitment actually comes first before you notice the next steps you need to take, before you recognize your competence in different areas that you're trying to enhance. Like, the commitment is first. And I think that we have to, remind ourselves to be committed to what it is that we really, really want. For physicians who are thinking about breaking down those steps and wanting to know, like, what they would take and exactly what to do, um, on January 28th at 7 p.m. ET, I'm actually gonna give a workshop called Passport to Profit for doctors that are wanting to create their own high-earning remote career as a doctor abroad, where we can really break down and equip ourselves with our own roadmaps to start that journey towards living and working abroad with freedom and purpose.
That's awesome. I love that. Um, we'll make sure to link that in the show notes. And as you say, freedom and purpose, I'm also reminded that you spoke about I think it was the four freedoms that being nomad really supports for you. Will you tell us about those freedoms?
Yes. So, one is time freedom. So, being able to control your time, do what you want at your leisure. Another is location freedom, to have the ability to be wherever you want to be in space. Another is the financial freedom, so that you don't feel any, monetary constraints on what it is that you want to do. And another aspect is that relational freedom, like the space and the ability to really cultivate and have the types of connections that are most meaningful to you.
So powerful. I think that you have done such tremendous work in solving for joy for yourself. And it is an act of profound intention and generosity to help other people solve for joy who are motivated, interested, and inspired to follow in some kind of similar pathway, even though it may be their own. Last question for you is, so when some people think about being a nomad and a physician, they think about being hired to work in person as a physician in another country, which is not at all what you are doing. Do you have experience helping people with that aspect, or is it then pretty much all telehealth remote work that helps them be location free?
So it really depends on what it is that the physician wants. So I have some physician clients who really want to work for someone else, and they're really prescribed in where they would like to be living, and it's a particular space. So for those physicians, I help them to obtain an employment in that particular country. And maybe they want to do it virtually. So it would be a remote position. But for some other physicians, they really wanna be able to have that location freedom where they don't wanna be in one particular country or a particular city. And so for them, if they wanna be employed, it's finding them opportunities that are specific to, their specialty and what they wanna, really pursue in their passion in medicine, and allowing them to, really interact and have positions that allow them to be abroad, that allow them to be anywhere in the world as they do that particular type of, job. Um, for most, I would say most of the physicians that I work with, they wanna have even more flexibility than that, and so they don't want to work for someone else. And I think that is really how you get the most time and location freedom is really making all those decisions for yourself. And so I would say the majority of the physicians that I actually work with, they want to build a business that allows them to control where they're going to be. They can be anywhere, how much time they're going to spend working, or how much leisure they have. And that's really about being able to digitize their medical expertise and life experience in a way that allows them to work from anywhere. So whether that is a consulting business, a coaching business, telemedicine, it can look a variety of ways, depending on what it is that they really want and what their passion is. But it's being able to really bridge that gap between this is the place that I work, this hospital or this clinic, and really be able to take those skills and use them in a transferable way that allows them to live the life that they want.
That totally makes sense to me. And again, opens even more doors, right? Just doors upon doors open when you expand outside of the employment model. Um, and it might be a first step, right? Somebody might be like, I'm willing and ready to take myself off the continent, go to some other place. And it feels scary to do both new self employment plus new location simultaneously. Um, so I can imagine a situation where people did locums at home and then traveled and put their toe in a little bit to see what they could do on their own and then come back and do locums at home, sort of alternate until the water temperature is inviting to them.
Yes, I think some people decide to do it that way, and then some people decide to do both things simultaneously, like have a bridge job. So they'll have a remote position that will allow them to live abroad, and so they know, how to do that particular type of work, but at the same time, they're building their ultimate freedom, business at the same time. So for some people, it's doing both things, and I think that's what the freedom is about, right? To be able to do the things you wanna do most and design it your way.
Last thoughts on how this has impacted your joy and your journey of solving for joy.
I think that I've learned that if there is a deep yearning or desire that you have, whether it's to travel, whether it's to live abroad, whether it's to create something that has never existed before, that is really important to not ignore it. It is really an external journey, for an inward purpose, and it can be used in any way you like to benefit not only you, but all those in your life who you touch and you serve.
So inspiring. Kristine, thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your insight and inspiration and journey with our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor.
I'm going to mark my calendar for January 28th. I think that
Thank
sounds
you.
great. Yes, can't wait to keep learning from you, friend.
Same here.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next time on Solving for Joy. Thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to introduce you next week to my guest, Dr. Amy King, psychologist in the Portland area, who promotes resilience for families, healthcare entities, schools, businesses, and individuals with an incredibly skillful, trauma-responsive approach. Dr. Amy brings deep insight into fostering connection and social emotional capacity in the face of challenges. You will not want to miss this conversation. It's packed with practical wisdom and heart. Can't wait to see you next week with that. And this is your last invitation of the year to consider investigating ROAR. This is the 6-month hybrid individual and group program for physicians that are ready to have their own backs and have accompanied progress for the next 6 months in reclaiming their brains, their power, owning their own potential, accessing their inherent joy, and raising both voices and vibrations. I hope some of you will join us, and the information is at joypointsolutions.com. I want to take a quick moment to acknowledge our incredible team. This podcast is produced by the amazing Kelsey Vaughn, post-production and more handled by Alyssa Wilkes, and my steadfast friend and director of operations, Denise Crane. Our theme music is by Dennis Kishcook, cover photography by the talented Shelby Bracken, and a special appreciation to my loyal champion and #1 fan, Suzanne Sanchez. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. May we continue caring for ourselves, caring for others, and may we continue solving for joy. Take care. We'll see you next time.